when there are new AI tools or models that you're going to use, like what are the prerequisites for them? What are you looking for in terms of security, privacy, et cetera, compliance? What is it that you're requiring in that intake? So there's tons and tons of little parts to that AI governance, and I actually have.
GTM AI podcast with Jonathan Moss and Coach K, where you get the latest with AI and GTM today.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I am Coach K, and I am pleased to have my man who is a fellow founding member of the AI Circle and who is a Gen AI. I won't call you a nerd. I'm a nerd, but I'll say pro. A Gen AI pro along with me, Daniel Beecham. How are you, sir?
Good. I don't know. I am like somewhere in between an enthusiast and a practitioner.
I know. I never know what to call myself. I'm like, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I am a nerd. I know that for sure. So I'll claim that.
Yeah, you're like, I love this stuff. Yeah,
I love this
see how
stuff.
far that gets me.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. I know we've been in the AI Circle for a bit since it launched last couple of months ago, which has been a lot of fun. And then you and I had a chance to catch up. And so I was loving just your thoughts and perspectives on AI in general and actually helping integrate it into a company. But before we get into all the AI shenanigans,
Yeah.
I want to talk about you. Like, I know obviously someone could go to your LinkedIn. I'll link your LinkedIn profile to this so people can look at your professional background. But more so, I am always curious on your own journey of going from, in the past, you were a business consultant one time for years. So you went from that world and now you're into the Gen AI space, or I should say AI space in general, not just Gen AI. And I'm just curious, what's been the path? Why are you here? Why do you like this? Just tell me about the whole scoop and take as much time you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started off at Georgia Tech doing biomedical engineering for the first few years, switched out of that, actually did a bit of a service desk in between gap year. So a lot of IT calls, taking tons of information and learning all these applications. And that's where I decided to go the MIS route. Came back, graduated from Georgia Tech. That's actually not fully correct. I went to the military. A small little footnote there for a couple of years. Came back. Then I graduated from Georgia Tech. Went out into a AI marketing startup company with, I would say, 5 people at the time.
Nice.
4 or 5 people. And so very small, failed very fast, learned a lot of really cool lessons.
Failed very fast. Nice.
Yeah. You learn a lot of what not to do in that sense, which is just as important as what to do sometimes. So got my first exposure with AI there. Went on into a bit of a consulting role at a construction company, just building like spreadsheets. Nothing AI related there, but moved on to work at Capgemini. So back into this like IT consulting, got super lucky where I landed into another AI, this Pegasystems customer decisioning hub. So I was a product owner there. You'll see this kind of pattern of me being in the business side of things, on AI projects, off AI projects, and back on again. So that was my first, or I guess my second AI exposure there. And then got all this interesting background doing data governance work, change management, master data management, working with offshore, onshore teams. I got a lot of really interesting, I guess, different perspectives throughout my career that lend themselves very well now to generative AI and all this change that we're seeing and all the transformations that companies are trying to go through and the difficulty sometimes adopting that generative AI tools and programs. So yeah, ended up where I am right now. My first big product management AI platform work that I did. So really getting hands-on with data scientists, data engineers, solution architects, really learning the ins and outs of what makes a successful AI platform, successful AI tools, really taking that customer-centric approach to everything that we do as well. Since then, generative AI had come into the picture. I got myself heavily involved because I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I still do, obviously. I got myself heavily involved, carved out a little bit of the generative AI space at my current company. Yeah, doing a lot of really cool stuff there, and I'm sure we'll get around to it.
Love it, man. I know it's interesting. You go from your degree in college versus now where you are now. It's funny when I look over my life of all the things that get connected, even though it might be random. I'm sure it has some foundational principles of how you think around AI, which is fascinating, I think. But what you're doing now, I want to dig into a couple of them. One thing you mentioned was, we talked about before, just having some internal training programs for Microsoft AWS and GitHub tools. So walk me through, what does that mean? Because that's very broad. I want to dig in a little bit. What does that mean?
Yeah. So for us, it's been curating. First of all, there's tons of really good content out there, right? There's every single big company and has really good training content, Microsoft AWS, Google. If you're thinking
Yep.
about these big firms, they have great training material. There's entire companies built on training generative AI as well. So there's a lot of really good training material out there that already exists. And we're a pretty small firm. So spending the time and money to create our own training content isn't always necessarily the best way to get a good ROI. So I've helped really curate that content is just one part of it, right? So yeah, curate the content, fit it to personas. So we've got a couple personas that we've identified. So we have different tracks that we've created, and obviously vetted some of the material that's in there. That is part of it, right? The other part is that we have weekly office hours. So as people have questions, they want to share really cool use cases. The real way to get people to adopt AI tools and generative AI tools is getting them hands-on. And not just getting them hands-on with either with potentially really good use cases that are good for their day-to-day lives, or something that maybe is really funny and exciting, like some generative AI image creation is like
Whatever.
one of the things that we used, right? It was just like a warm-up, right? Hey, go to this website, generate a picture that you think is funny and share it with the group. So getting these icebreakers and a generative AI, getting people used to using the tools and getting them excited about it. That's one other aspect to it. And then the other part of it is obviously tracking adoption, right? So there's certain tools that help you view people's use across the organization. There are rather surveys and such that we do quarterly. And then we also have a more specific small like pilot program that we're doing that's a little more hands-on, a little more white glove approach before we roll out a particular tool to the rest of the organization.
So when you talk about this, did you help with the actual training inside of Microsoft, AWS, and others? Or was it like you're training your team on how to use those tools?
So
Oh,
actually,
nice.
So what I've been personally involved in most heavily is internally, right? So we are, where I'm at right now is a consulting firm. And so there's a lot of pressure for us to deliver faster, more better value, better quality. So all that pressure comes into this. We need to use generative AI as an accelerator. We need it to help us create better quality content, better quality code, So all that pressure from that everybody else is receiving across enterprises to adopt, we're also getting that same pressure to deliver. Yeah. Does that answer the question, or did I just go another?
Yeah, no, you're totally good. So a big thing we talked about before is like kind of proof of concepts, or at least planning ahead. So I'm curious, let's take a step back before we dive into the proof of concept thing.
Yeah.
Walk me through your process of start to finish. Let's just say you're coming to an organization and they say, hey, we want AI. And you're like, great. What's the first step? What do you do?
Yeah. And that's like, first question is why? You ask them why, right? Often if you can understand why, then you can take your first steps. If they don't know, half the time we have these conversations, it's somebody told us we have to have it, right? So that's always an interesting place to start, because then you have to say, okay, now let's take a look at your business processes. Let's see, what is your AI strategy? How do you even go about creating an AI strategy? Do you even know what AI does? So really, I don't like jumping directly into necessarily use cases, but I do want to jump into, where it could potentially help within your business processes. I think a business process, and I keep saying that word, that the kind of approach is really important. Otherwise, you're just doing AI to do AI. That's kind of that's my personal approach. That's how I like to see it. But
no, it's great. I think doing AI just for the sake of AI, I think so many times people see some cool tool, because there's a lot of freaking cool tools out there. They're like, ooh, we could do something like that, which is awesome. But then it turns into doing the tool because the tool does cool things, but it's not necessarily doing things that help the business do better things.
yeah,
Which
no,
is a way of
100%.
explaining what you said. So like with you, when you come to a strategy, like how do you, because I'm assuming you do the same thing relative to what I do. It's basically saying, let's back up a second before we jump into AI. There's 5 steps we got to do before. So what is the foundation principles that you like to use with an AI strategy inside of an org? Or I don't know if principles is the right word, but like concepts, whatever, frameworks, whatever term you want to use.
So it depends on their enterprise, the size of the enterprise, their data and AI maturity, right? Because let's just say it's smaller enterprises. I don't know that you're going to want to bring on a bunch of like expensive data scientists and data engineers and build a data platform if you're a 100-person company, right? That's a huge expense. And there's entire product teams out there and entire companies creating products so that you don't necessarily have to. So there's that aspect too for smaller firms, right? Or rather, unless of course that is your core value. If your core value is AI and that's where you want to, that's how you are serving your customers, then maybe you do want to build something custom. But that's part of the early discussion there. In terms of, and that's just kind of like for value size, two really important things to start considering which direction you want to take your AI journey.
Right.
Now, the next thing is I was talking about AI and data maturity, right? So with data maturity, if you have, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, if you have terrible data, you're going to have terrible results. Shoring that up is super important. Typically, I'd like to recommend cloud architecture just based out of the scalability and that because there's a lot of really cool tools with auto scaling and you don't have to have your internal IT team. There's obviously a lot of reasons to potentially adopt cloud technologies, but for AI specifically, I think it's particularly important. Again, just depends partially on your core values as a firm and your core value prop rather. So if your data is not in place, getting a good data governance program, doing maybe digital transformation, really making sure that everything that your data is easily accessible, it's good data, and there's some sort of governance gates across the process there to get you usable data. That could be potentially important. Let's just say if you are further along that journey and you do have good data, now it's like, where's your AI maturity, right? If your AI maturity is rather early stages, it's about setting up an AI governance team, some AI governance, which includes building out what those kinds of metrics and KPIs that you're measuring your AI tools with, creating an intake, right? So like when there are new AI tools or models that you're going to use, like what are the prerequisites for them? What are you looking for in terms of security, privacy, et cetera, compliance? What is it that you're requiring in that intake? So there's tons and tons of little parts to that AI governance. And I actually had a whole webinar about just AI governance. So I'll cut forward to still like
you could go into that for a while, but
yeah. So let's just say if you are further along the AI maturity, then because I just covered, right? Just if you're just early stage, let's set this up, let's figure out what's important to you, and then moving on. Once you're further along in that stage, it's adoption, right? This is where your AI maturity, you put yourself in a good place. You know how to choose tools. You know how to maybe even create custom tools within the organization, or maybe use us or me to help drive some of this, whatever, right? That's where adoption comes in, right? Now that is one of the biggest challenges and oddly enough, least talked about challenges that I've seen. And we've seen it with our customers, and we've done some pretty big change management adoption programs. And it's that really, you get a really early spike in usage, and you really have to make sure that you, and then it plateaus, right? So the people who use it early are going to continue using it potentially. So you need to really build the hype up. You really need to identify those use cases. You really need to make sure that people get their hands on it. And as we discussed earlier, so driving that adoption within the organization is in the end, the only way to get the most value out of it.
Yeah.
So I know I just said a lot of things.
No, that's great. I have a bunch of questions I want to do down. So you talked about an AI governance team of some kind. Like, where is, in your mind, if you were in charge, you said, hey team, this is exactly what should happen as far as structure.
Yeah.
Where would they sit? Underneath the revenue org, underneath the IT org? Like where do they do? Because for example, Walt Disney just literally launched their own AI business team that kind of oversees the entire work. So they, as far as the structure, I can't remember if they said where they report to, but I know they have oversight over the entire organization as far as AI is concerned, which is crazy. In your mind, whether you're large or small, what is the best place for someone to be reporting up to, or structure-wise, to be able to either help just revenue teams or the entire org? Like, what do you think?
So for starters, you need to have representation from every part of the organization. How you define that is up to you, but you really need to have a lot of representation. You need to have it probably sitting somewhere within or just under your C-suite. I'd say executive leadership and executive oversight to a degree is particularly important, especially when you're trying to drive AI initiatives. Just like anything else, it's easier to get adoption if your leaders are saying, this is important, this is something that we have to do to maybe survive as a business, for example, since it is considered one of the more transformative technologies to come out in the last couple decades. So yeah, I would say I'd probably want to sit as close as possible to the executive leadership team. But again, representation from across the company is incredibly important there.
Do you think, and I totally agree with you, by the way, do you feel like you talk about adoption? I have so many thoughts around this because there's this world we live in now where it's a lot of augmenting what humans do, but we're going fast into a world where a lot of tasks are going to be done for humans. It's going to be more of a human overseeing in certain tasks, making sure the end product is good, which means that the adoption is not, number one, doesn't mean adoption is a thing anymore because it's already doing it behind the scenes and then bringing to them results. So it just changes what they're expected to do as far as editing, whatever. And then two, it means that people have to drastically shift what they're asked to do in the first place. It's like, where do you see, I know right now most companies are still in the augmentation mode, but we're going to quickly go into this more agentic type world. Like, where do you see that balance between those two?
Yeah, so I think it's like the ideal world is that people get to focus on things that are more important to them. I don't know if that's always going to be the case. I think, like you said, there's going to be a lot of parts of people's workflows that maybe go away completely, or you just need some human oversight. So it's really going to be either adopt the technology, or I hate to say it, but maybe you need another job, right? There's going to be some displacement, but it's not always bad displacement. I think where we're going to lose some jobs, we're going to gain other jobs. I think a lot of people are going to obviously have to shift their skills a bit, right? And so that kind of reskilling of sorts takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money. So people that are already, I think younger folks that are fully embracing generative AI and AI tools are going to come in and be the new stars potentially, unless of course some of us older folks, no offense,
I'm not offended,
but we're in a good place, right? We're in a good place because we love this stuff. We're adopting it already. Not everybody is, right? Not everybody is. And there's a lot of jobs right now that can't be done with generative AI. And I'm not sure if we're going to get into robotics today, but we're a little bit far off from the manual labor being done for us.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place of where we are. It's like, it could go so many directions, but I truly do feel two things will happen. Obviously, I just read this interesting analysis on, I think it was from Forbes, about the impact that AI is already having on the labor market. And that's just talking like, it's the basic stuff from image generation to content creation to all the stuff that used to be these job categories are now poof, gone because AI can do it all. So I think it's going to dramatically shift in much more ways as we get more agent type flows in, and it's going to have to. And I think the thing for me anyways, is that I'm looking forward to it is because a lot of the things that AI is doing for me is the things that I wasn't necessarily gifted at, and I have to think about too much. And now I go into editing mode versus creation mode as far as the actual content creation. Cause I don't know about you, but for me, I have this thing in my head. I have to sit down and think about, okay, how do I write this? What should be the section titles? And now I just going to get Gen AI and just talk out loud, structures it all for me. So the creation of the thought is me, but it puts form to my unformed shenanigans, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just so nice. And then I can automate it all from there. So like not only can I just talk about it, but then I have an automation. I just go into Slack, leave a voice note, and then it goes through this whole motion of stuff of creating content. So I'm done so that I can pump out stuff so much faster. So for me, I'm excited because that means I can do more of what makes me and less of the time and things that takes away from my time of creating. Does that make sense? Which I'm excited about. But that will impact the labor market because some people's jobs are just strictly trying to execute on things they're trying to get done.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fine balance between the two.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think right now where we're going to see some interesting movement, speaking to your point, is greasing the wheels on all those workflows. Right now, it seems like you really have to put in a significant effort to make those workflows natural, right? And I think there's going to be really good products out there, or products that already exist that are going to improve and make that kind of work and make being yourself easier for more people right now. I think right now it's accessible to a relatively low percentage of people just because there's too many hurdles. It's just not as smooth as we'd like it to be.
Yep. I agree. Let's dive into, I want to make sure we didn't skip on this because I want to make sure we get into it. So your proof of, oh man, I can't talk. Proof of concepts that you do with people. So once you've gone through the process of helping them understand what the heck the business objectives and goals are,
Right.
And then you walk through like making sure the data is good and all the substructure stuff. Then you go to proof of concepts. How do you go around understanding like when a proof of concept is successful or not? Obviously, I know it's attached to business objectives, but a lot of times objectives are these big audacious goals, and proof of concepts are more like the nitty gritty. What are we looking for immediately? Like, how do you set those up to really truly understand which tool would work best? And how do you help them understand what criteria to look for? Because what I find is that most people don't know what's even possible. So it's hard for them to make success criteria on something they don't know. So walk me through, how do you do that?
Yeah. So I think success criteria is, and in certain terms, some people might say ROI, which is always or not always, but has been a difficult thing to measure, right? I think a big part of it is obviously recognizing where there are large amounts of hours being spent doing menial work. So often you see, I'll give you an example, right? So within utilities, they have these reports. So every time there's a power safety shutoff event, they have 10 days to create a report. It takes tons and tons of people to do this over those 10 days. And it's really just wrangling data from a bunch of different resources to understand what events occurred, why they occurred, and gathering them all in one place. So there's certain aspects to that, for example, where you're saying, okay, I need to generate this document. It's usually, there's a format it's pretty specific. There's a lot of time spent on it. So there's a potential for pretty good ROI there. And then deciding whether or not that's successful is a matter of, were we able to reduce the amount of effort to create that by, let's just say X%, right? Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 90%. That's a decision that needs to be made at some point. What does success look like? Not necessarily, I'm just going to tell you what success is, but that needs to be a decision with you and the customer, and it needs to be set at some point pretty early, because otherwise, you're right. You get to the end of a POC and you say, was this successful? Well, we don't know because we didn't set success metrics.
We don't know.
Right?
Yeah.
So set some level of expectations early, and then you can go ahead and say whether that's successful. Obviously, if a POC becomes an MVP, I would say that's a success. There's qualitative success metrics, which could be like, does this make you could ask surveys, does this make your job easier? Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied? There's certain things like that, right?
Yeah, basic stuff.
Yeah, because in the end user matters just as much as saving time, saving costs. And I hate to talk about saving so much, because there's a lot of revenue generating activities that could happen. It's just a lot of companies right now are thinking about cost reduction.
Yeah.
And it's just savings. Yeah, it's a little bit maybe short-sighted, but I can't fault them, because they're trying to get their hands on generative AI. They don't want to fall behind. And this is what people like to see, right? This is what stakeholders see.
Yeah. So let's tear that apart just a little bit. So like when you come into, if you can, give me a specific either example. You can keep them anonymous. But like when you talk to a company, they had give me an understanding of their objective, and then how you decided on what to even run a POC on, and then what the success criteria was, and how did it go? Can you walk me through an example of one?
I will try to answer all those questions. If I get them out of order or forget,
it's okay. I'll keep you on track.
Yes, absolutely. We had one of our clients has a particular compliance flow of sorts. So the companies come to them, they submit some sort of report, but they have to fill out this rather long document that's complex, right? And so what ends up happening is they either submit it incorrectly or ask a bunch of questions and take up time that just people that don't have very much time, to be quite frank. It becomes a very, there's just too much waste in that whole process. And so something as simple as, one of the simple early use cases has always been this virtual chatbot. Basically, there's specific data out there that can answer a bunch of questions. How do you go about extracting that data? So we created a virtual chatbot, and we're able to show that it was generating proper responses. So like having a particular response rate correctness was part of the success metrics. Being able to show that it drove some of the call volume away as one of the success metrics. There's obviously having to send back less of these forms because they were filled out incorrectly is a success metric. So I don't remember the exact numbers around those, to be quite frank, but that's just an example of something that we have done. And it's, and again, relatively simple in terms of retrieval augmented generation, implementation, custom tooling, not terribly difficult to do from a technical perspective, but yes, like having ways to measure whether or not it was successful is, again, really important when we were able to do that. And so
it's cool. I like it. So that can be, I'll probably ask you one or two more questions, but this brings up the whole thing with trust, because most people trying to adopt, it's like, how do they know when RAG is performing correctly, that the results they're getting is correct? Because the only way to confirm that is going back to whatever humongous long document and reading the whole thing to make sure it's right. So it's like, there is this trust building space and time that has to happen for people to really truly go, this is awesome and I can trust it.
Yeah.
And I hear this from all the time from leaders, like, how do I trust that this is actually legit and is giving me the stuff that I need? What do you say to them? How do you, I won't say combat that, but how do you change people's minds in building that trust?
So there's several techniques. I'm going to go more to the technical techniques rather than the personable techniques.
Please.
One of them that's pretty common now is citations, right? So being able to just go back and say, this is where the information came from. That's really huge, right? Just being able to pull that in there. The other piece there that's interesting is that there's certain frameworks that you can have, like question and answers, where you have an expected question or expected answers to like frequently asked questions, et cetera. There's certain ways to train up your model to answer more frequently correctly. And be able to measure that, right? So there's one that's called Tonic, and I forget that's the company name. They have a really cool way to just measure how qualitatively, not just like numbers, right? Just qualitatively, how well is your RAG doing? So are you getting correct answers, et cetera? The other piece that I find funny and is that you can build this into your workflow, but there's this prompt engineering portion to it where the LLM will often, if you ask him, is this correct? Or are you sure? Like something simple like that, it will make it go back and check again. And you will often then get the correct answer if it was incorrect in the first place. So you can build that into a workflow, whether through prompt engineering or adding like another layer of like agentic RAG with some quotation marks around that. So there are ways to alleviate some of that. And and then the other thing is like even putting something simply into the prompt and on the back end that just says, do not say something unless you are 100% sure, or something simple little things like that, where it really helps you get the right answers. And there's papers on this. There's a lot of really interesting work on that. In terms of building trust with people, that's a whole different beast, but I'm sure you're quite aware of that.
Yeah. The people side is different because there's just some mindset things around it, but it all comes down to results for me of saying, first, it's understanding what would it take to have them trust. That's number one, is what do you need to trust this? That's number one. And then two is actually showing them what's possible. Because a lot of times, again, people don't even know what's even possible. And then when you get clear on it, can show them what can happen, and then show them the results manually and say, okay, this said this thing, and then this document said this thing here. And I'm like, whoa. So like a lot of it's just the proof's in the pudding. Same time though, I love you brought up prompting, because I work with a couple of companies working on their products on the back end with prompt engineering. So some of the stuff I'm creating is like crazy, insane stuff, but it's basic stuff. Even though the prompts look complex, when you break it down, it's like, I just have simple sections, and each section has these kind of things of saying, you need to rate yourself as far as your confidence score on this particular thing, or measure yourself on how well you're doing, or whatever the cases are, going back and correcting things. And then when you add in, sorry, this is like getting my meaning or nerd out. When you think about, that's in the one prompt. When you think about some sort of automation that goes through and has either another type of LM, another AI go over, scan the answers and the transcript and come back out with the result, then it's like a double coin peer review, AI peer review result. So like, when you think of it from that lens, it's like, there's some really cool things you can do. For me, on an A side, trusting AI, but I also know its weaknesses. So I know how to tweak it to make sure the weaknesses don't show. Does that make sense? Yeah. And people just don't understand that because they're just not in the prompting engineering nerd world like I am. So it's just like helping them understand that is crucial, which all comes back down to, sorry, I could go on this for a while, but it's all about building trust with an AI the same way you do with a human. It's just being open and transparent with what you're wanting to have happen. Yeah. And people just aren't used to that type of thing. So it's just,
and it completely depends on what kind of interaction you're having. If you're having an interaction with a customer service desk that you call once every 6 years, you don't really necessarily need to build trust with a customer service agent, but you do need answers, and you need the right answers. And in that case, one of the things that gets overlooked so often is building your generative AI baseline against your human baseline. Because I can't be the only one who's called into a service desk and not been able to get something resolved, and then called back 3 seconds later, got a different person on the phone and got it resolved within a second. And so having this like expectation that generative AI is going to solve everything 100% of the time, when in reality humans might be solving it 70% or 80%, it's just, there's some disparity there that needs to be talked about.
You know what's funny is that when I talk about this with people, it's a comparison. Like, for example, one simple example that's in the sales right now is just like the automating of content from the transcript into CRM data fields. And this whole trust thing comes up all the time. And I'm like, okay, I know for a fact this is already better than your sales reps already. And it's not because sales reps aren't stupid. It just means they're busy and other things to do. And it's just the sales world. It's just they don't have time to do data entry. So I'm like, how confident are you in the human entry of this? Because otherwise you would never be looking into this. And the answer is 5%. And I'm like, I'm going to get you to at least 50. That's got to be a win. So anyways, it's that I love comparing it from human side versus AI side, going, how much do you trust how it is now with humans?
Yeah.
And if nothing changes, then it's going to stay the same. So what do you want to do?
Absolutely.
So, crazy. Tell me this, one last question, which is, what are you most excited about over the next, I know a year is a lifetime in AI, but over the next year, 25, what are you excited about?
Ooh. So I think with multimodality, with open source has been relatively within a Q4 becoming bigger and bigger. I think 2025, you're going to see that coming in with hardware, right? So I think AI hardware is going to be huge in 2025. I'm excited from a super nerdy perspective, just to get my hands on it.
Yeah.
It's not something that I'm going to go out there and sell to my customers, but it is something that I'm personally nerding out about quite a bit. And obviously, I hate to be a bit of a like the mockingbird, but it's the agentic workflows, it's the agents. They're going to be huge. And we're already seeing some of these agentic workflows, at least in the more mature organizations from an AI perspective. But I think, it's going to be that the quality of life improvements with the heart.
I know, right? When we think about the impact you have in the real world life, like I think about hardware more as the result of wearables, like this ring is an AI health monitor.
Yeah.
Like just the things you can do from the wearable human component with the hardware is fascinating. It's a whole other thing, but
it's going to be
it's pretty cool. Daniel, thank you so much for coming, man. I appreciate it. Love getting your insights. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Oh, sure. I probably shouldn't give you my phone number, but how about LinkedIn? I can link some stuff. I don't know how that typically works with podcasts, but
it's okay. I'll at least, if you're okay with it, I'll put in your LinkedIn profile at least. If you want to send me your email, you can do that. It's up to you. And then I'll link it in the show notes as well. But otherwise, if someone wants to get in touch with you, just look at the podcast show notes and it'll be in there for them to come bug you. So
wonderful. It's been a pleasure speaking with you again.
Thanks, my man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Good catching up.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.